He was talking about Bruce Lee's philosophy, the art of fighting without fighting. Bruce Lee said, when you want to be an effective fighter, you must be like water because water doesn't change. It can be liquid, it could be solid, it could be gas. And immediately I thought about organizations, the ones who are trying to scale past $1 million, past $5 million, and the patterns I see.
Welcome to Your Audience is Waiting, the show where we turn your vision into visibility and your content into customers. I'm your host, Eleisha Everett, and if you've ever felt like you're doing all the things online, but still not seeing the growth or engagement you deserve, you're in the right place because your audience is already out there. They want to hear from you. And together, we're going to make sure they do. So let's dive in.
I was listening to Vuzi Zimpekwayo's podcast, Ideas That Matter, where he was interviewing Professor Lumumba. And Professor Lumumba said something that stopped me in my tracks. He was talking about Bruce Lee's philosophy, the art of fighting without fighting. Bruce Lee said, when you want to be an effective fighter, you must be like water because water doesn't change. It can be liquid, it could be solid, it could be gas. And immediately I thought about organizations, the ones who are trying to scale past $1 million, past $5 million, and the patterns I see. They have a vision, they know where they want to go, but they're unwilling to adapt how they actually get there. And sometimes they're just not aware that they do need to adapt in their approach on how to get there. They're stuck in the approach that got them to $500,000, for example, and wondering why it's not taking them to $5 million. I recently worked alongside the CEO of a scaling multimillion-dollar SaaS company, managing her social media presence, yes, but more importantly, I got to sit in on the strategic conversations that were happening behind the scenes. And I got to see how companies at this level think, how they make decisions, and what separates the ones who scale from the ones who plateau. And what I noticed aligned perfectly with what Professor Lumumba was saying. Your vision doesn't need to change. Your solution, it doesn't need to change. But the way you reach your audience, that has to evolve. And if you're not willing to adapt, you plateau. Today, I'm breaking down exactly what that looks like and how you can audit your own business to see where you need to adapt. So let's jump in. First, let's talk about the levels of entrepreneurship because there are distinct stages and each one requires something different from you. So the first revenue level is the entrepreneurial level, $0 to $100,000. That takes grit, grind, and scrappiness. The next level is the founder level, scaling to $500,000. That takes hiring the right people. The third level is what I call generational changing level. That's the $1 million mark. Some say it's easier to get there after you've hit $500,000, and that takes scalable, repeatable systems and processes and the strongest hires you've ever made. And then there's the legacy level, $5 million and beyond. At this stage, you're not just generating revenue, you're doubling down on scalable systems, elevating your team to leadership positions, and you're continuing to hire the best talent for every seat on your team. Now, you may be wondering, what does this have to do with reaching my ideal audience, adapting like water, and 10xing the revenue in my business? The short answer is everything. Here's what companies miss. Your audience hasn't changed. The problem you solve hasn't changed, but the way your audience wants to be reached, that's constantly evolving. So let me give you what I call the conveyor belt framework. This is the customer journey, how your audience becomes aware of who you are, how you serve them, what they experience once they're in your ecosystem, and critically, how they become advocates who connect others to your brand. Most companies audit their marketing, but they don't audit the entire conveyor belt. And that's where the breakdown happens. So let's walk through it really quickly. The buyer's journey. There's an open loop, which means they're exposed to a desire or problem that they have. And then there comes awareness. They realize that they don't yet have a solution to that desire or the problem that they are now aware of. And so then they go on the hunt. They are actively searching and looking for that solution. And once they find a few things they can consider, they're in the consideration phase. They're starting to educate themselves on which place or which brand or which company will provide them the best solution to help them solve their desire or reach their desire or have a solution to their problem. And then they'll make the decision. They choose their brand based on what they've found, what they've researched, and what they've learned. So then we move on to the customer journey. And it's super simple. Number one, they buy from you. Number two, they experience your solution. And number three, they become an advocate. And if your solution isn't that great, then they will not be an advocate. So here's the question. At every single stage of that conveyor belt, Are you meeting them where they are, or are you still reaching them the way you did in the past? When I was sitting in those strategy meetings with the SaaS company, this is something that I kept seeing leadership wrestle with. They had a solution that worked. It's a beautiful system. They have customers who love them. People talk about them a lot, but their approach to reaching new customers is something they're working through. How do we scale to that next level? If you don't have the answer to that, then that is your plateau point. This is where the Bruce Lee principle comes in. Water is water, whether it's liquid, solid, or gas. Your solution is your solution, but the form it takes to reach your audience, that has to shift. As I was studying and preparing for this podcast episode, I came across an Adobe article that highlighted organizations who renovated their approach without changing their core offering. And the examples are powerful. You've got CeraVe, who used storytelling to connect with their audience in a deeper way. You've got Uniqlo, spelled Uniqlo. They ran a giveaway campaign that met their audience where they were, which means their audience exists both online and in store. So they did a campaign that reached both of them. And then you've got American Express. Yes, the credit card company. They created a community hub, and that was a space for connection, not just transactions. And then you've got Slack. Slack kept it simple, and they used X, which is formerly Twitter, to start conversations and drive engagement. And then we've got Sephora. They used technology to create a personalized experience that felt custom to each buyer. But remember, Sephora is a brick and mortar store. But do you notice the pattern? They didn't all do the same thing. They didn't all follow one size fits all playbook. They leaned into where their audience was and how their audience wanted to be reached. So let me give you the evolution. If you are a local word of mouth business, you scaled by creating a website, a place where your audience could find you online. But if you've mastered SEO, then you scaled by building a social media presence to amplify your reach beyond search. But if you have a strong social media presence, your next level isn't doing more of the same. It's creating a community, a space where your audience can not only connect with you, but they can connect with one another, and they don't just consume your content. So here's the question you have to think about. Are you willing to renovate your approach, even if it means letting go of what's comfortable and what you've done in the past? So here's the strategic insight most companies miss. If you stop talking about the vision, the problem you solve, the transformation you offer, your customers, they'll forget about you. Not because they don't care, but because they're drowning. They're drowning in noise, I think is the way that a lot of people have been putting it lately. But basically that means their attention is being pulled in 15,000 different ways, and you are still one of those people trying to get their attention. So you have to remain consistent in your message. You have to be clear in your message, and you have to be willing to adapt how you deliver it. And keep it simple. Meet them where they are, while simultaneously showing them where they could be. You'll do this through the language you use, the words you choose, the methodologies you choose to reach them, how you choose to connect with them, and how you choose to connect them with one another. And the common theme among all of those brands I shared earlier, they chose one platform to lean into. They didn't try to be everywhere. They got clear on where their audience was, and they went all in. Now hear me when I say this. Omnichannel works, but only when there's a clear strategy behind it. Purpose, audience, credibility, and execution. That's my PACE method. I break it down in episode 3. If you want to hear more, I'll link it below. But here's what no one's talking about. In order for you to reach your audience effectively, everyone within your company who supports the conveyor belt must be aligned. So for example, if your marketing team is using language your customers don't actually use, you need customer service in the conversation because they're the ones hearing what your customers are actually saying. If your marketing is driving traffic but sales isn't closing, you've got a messaging misalignment. Marketing is speaking to awareness stage buyers, but sales is trying to close decision stage deals. That's not a sales problem. That's a systems problem. And in my decade of HR experience, I've learned this. For any part of the business to thrive and exceed goals, there must be collaboration across teams. Marketing done in a silo is a setup for decreased ROI, stagnant growth, and untapped revenue opportunities, to be honest. And if you're scaling, you can't afford silos anymore. One of the things I observed in those leadership meetings was the alignment across teams and whether the organization understood and could execute on the strategy in place. The realignment is work. It's not sexy, but it is essential to the scalability of your company. So here's your homework. Audit your conveyor belt. Number 1, map out your customer journey from awareness to advocacy. Where are the gaps? Where are people dropping off? Number 2, ask yourself, am I reaching my audience the way I did in the past? If yes, that's your plateau point. Number 3, check for alignment across teams. Is your marketing saying one thing, your sales team saying another, and your customer service team hearing something completely different from actual customers? That's your bottleneck. And number 4, identify one place where you can adapt. Not abandon your vision, adapt your approach. Be like water. Before you make your next strategic move, download the Revenue Plateau Audit. It walks you through the 5 audience awareness stages so your message lands with decision makers right where they are in the buying journey. The link is in the show notes. Go grab it, work through it with your team, and your strategic clarity will sharpen immediately. Thanks for hanging out with me today. And remember, your vision does not need to scale, but your willingness to adapt how you reach your audience, that's what separates companies who scale from companies who plateau. Be like water. Your audience is waiting. I'll see you in the next episode.